Hey, it's Ed here. Welcome to Lessons from My Mentor. This one is just came about through just a lot of different mentors. So it was like hard to pinpoint one where this all came from. But I just felt like compelled to share this. And my intent is not to be inspirational or motivational or anything like that. I'm just sharing my story because I had this sense that it would really help a lot of other people. So you know how you go around the room sometime with icebreakers and you ask some silly questions just to get everyone comfortable and growing. One popular one there for a while was like, what superhero do you most identify with? And when I answered that question, I was like, underdog. I don't know how many people remember underdog. It was a cartoon in the 70s. So when I came to the United States in 75, that was pretty popular cartoon. So you'd have to Google it or look on YouTube. I'm sure you'll find some episodes, but it was underdog, just like the name applies, underdog. It's like you're not set out to be the winner. You have to come from behind, that sort of implication. And that certainly was my life. And if you've read my very first book, Extraordinary Tales of a Rather Ordinary Man, you'll know some of the detail. But when I came over from Germany, we dressed like Bavarians, like from The Sound of Music. If you think about, although that was Austria, if you think about Sound of Music, how they dress, that's how we dressed. That was just the way it was. But my parents didn't know any better. So we came to the United States dressed like that, went to school like that for a while, and we were ridiculed. We were bullied. I was bullied, made fun of. And then as I was a teenager and stuff, my skin wasn't the best and people made fun of me and I never got a date. And, it just all kinds of stuff like that. And then when I was in basic training, even I was 17 years old and I got picked on and bullied, because most people were older than 17. And there was a lot of new type of people I'd never met, never interacted with before in my life. And the drill sergeant, they had it out, trying to get me to quit, which I didn't. But I just had this resolve in me, this resiliency in me, because of my parents, I suppose, and what they had to deal with, and with the Holocaust and such. And so I was like, became this fighter, this underdog. Like every time I was in an instance like that, I was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. And so, like, I remember with the drill sergeant, my thing was, I'm going to become an officer. I'm going to come back. I'm going to find Staff Sergeant Moultrie, and I'm going to make him do push-ups. That was my motivation in my 17-year-old mind. And I did. I finished and I went off and I became an officer. I mean, I would never do it because at that point now I'm matured, but that was my mindset. Whenever I got like beat up or something, I was like, I'm going to get it. Or like the tennis team. I can give you so many examples, that just fly off the top of my head because they're so real. Like I wanted to be like John McEnroe and Bjorn Borg again, going back now to the early 80s. Jimmy Connors, Andre Agassi showed up around that time as well. And it's like, I want to play tennis, but the only people that played tennis were the country club kids, and I couldn't afford anything. And I left the family sport of soccer, which was a sure thing. And I had this cheap Wilson 2000 racket and went on to the tennis team, showed up, everyone gets dropped off in their Volvos into the country club coaches, and there's just me. And actually, my partner was made of the same background, and we were scrappy as all heck. And we made the team, and we went, qualified for state and did really well. But it was like, I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna make that team, and I'm gonna, beat up on those country club kids. So that's just how I was made. And so in my career, it's the same way. And that's really my point. I'm giving you that background for those who don't know my background. I was no silver spoon, and we were on food stamps. In fact, even after I was married, we had kids. I was in graduate school, trying so hard to get a job after I graduated, and I couldn't get a decent job, a decent paying job. So I was like on food stamps. And I had at this point, I had a master's degree. So now I've graduated. I had a master's degree, and I was by that point probably a first lieutenant in the Army Reserve, and I had a lot of things, good things going on, but I just couldn't get a job. So I was like food stamps. And then I didn't want to take government aid other than food stamps. And so I worked whatever I could. And I remember I worked in factories. There's a couple that jumped to mind. The worst one was some factory that put together CD stands back in the day, when they had these things called CDs. They made these wooden stands you would buy like at Walmart or Kmart. And so I worked the assembly line like at 5 a.m. And I guess OSHA wasn't aware of it or whatever, but it was this giant factory where the lumber would come in at one end and they would cut it up and do whatever they did to manufacture it into the pieces that I would be putting together. And so you had all this sawdust in the air. I mean, it had to be horrible conditions. And then by the time it made its way down the assembly line, I was like, I think my main job there was I would take the assembled product. So it's like a glued together. So it smelled like, we were probably all getting high on something. And then my job, I think my job primarily was to take these flattened boxes and then open them up and then tape them so it'd be a rectangular shape. And then I would take the finished product, CD rack that was a yard wide, a yard high, and put it in the box, tape the box shut, put it on a pallet a certain way so you fit a certain amount. And then you would saran wrap that whole pallet after you had 50 or whatever, and then you'd move it out to the dock. So it was like this complete end-to-end operation. So I was doing that sort of stuff, for minimum wage. I didn't care what it was, I was going to do it because I just didn't want to take a handout that I did in the food stamps and just try to be as successful as I could while I was applying for other jobs. And no one wanted to hire me because I didn't have much experience or I had too much education. And it was like, oh, it was so hard. And then I worked at Teledyne Water Pick, and I worked the assembly line putting together shower heads. So I know shower heads really well. And so in there, you change positions every 15 minutes. So literally assembly line where the parts would be at one end and then you start assembling them and it moves down a conveyor belt. And at the end, your final job, if you're at that point, is you put in this plastic wrapper and you steam it shut and then it goes in the pallets and, out the door. So, man, I was just crying out inside. I'm telling you, it's just being gut honest with you. So what? I would have been graduate school, so 24, 25 years old and making minimum wage in a assembly line. And I was just crying. I would literally cry, not at the assembly line, but when I was by myself. And I would definitely cry inside. It's like, God, and for me, my faith is really central. But I was like, God, please, I just want to do something that I studied for, that I know I have. Nothing wrong with assembly line work. So don't get me wrong here, but I just knew I was called to more. It's like, gosh, Lord, please. And it was hard. And I did it for a long time. This went on for a long time. This wasn't like a summer. This was like a year or more. And then I think along the way, we started a window washing company, a lot of different things just to make money because we had a kid already. And it was just hard. It's like, I want to do something more. I know I'm called to do more. And God help me. What else do I need to do? And so I remember I then got this job at Poudre Valley Hospital in Fort Collins, where I was an anesthesia tech. And so I leveraged my combat medic experience and education, became a temporary tech while someone was out for 3-month rehab. And so I was like, only had 3 months, but I worked my butt off and did a lot of extra things there. And eventually they then hired me to like lead the computer stuff. But again, it was an hourly position and we wanted to have our second child and we're probably still on food stamps at that point. And it's like, Lord, please, what else must I do? Can I do? And so I just kept trying different things. And then I interviewed for a salary job and it was in physician relations. It was like $33,000 a year, which was actually what I would make if I was in the Army as a first lieutenant at the time. So this was a lot of money back then. And I remember Mary Hine calling me Saturday morning, got the job, hung up, and I just cried. I just wept. It's like, finally, we get off food stamps. We can really keep our family going. And I finally had like a career. And at this point, I'd have to go do a countdown on the years to be precise, but I'm thinking I was like 27 now, 26. This was a long journey. And so, and we didn't want to move, that was another thing that sort of held us back a little bit, was wanting to stay in that city. And so finally it started happening. And then I was like, oh, I want to do more though. I know I can do more. And I felt called to do more things. And it was like something is going to happen. And I won't go into the story because I've told it before in other venues, but I did have a defining moment related to technology that the IT division had and related to clinicians. And I was in physician relations, so I was the go-between and just defining moment that saved my daughter's life. And there I knew that was the instance I knew I was called specifically to leverage technology to save lives. I knew it without a doubt that that was my calling. So as soon as I could, I took the next job that I could find in a different city in IT. And now I'm suddenly a director level. I have no IT experience, and the people around me knew it. You know, I was always reliant on other people. I was like, I need help on this tech stuff. I get all the relationship things, the strategy things, the business side, but man, I'm not a tech person at all. Fortunately, I didn't really have to be a super tech person, but I knew enough. And then I finally put together the right team, and they took care of the tech while I could focus on sort of the strategy and the business and the relationships and things like that. And then I would just look like at other people, like at CIOs, and I'm thinking to myself, so now I'm probably like 30. I'm like, I want to be a CIO. I think that's what I'm called to be. And so I talked about strategic planning before for your life and career. And I remember putting that down as a vision. It's like, I want to be a CIO of a healthcare system. But here I was, you know, I was older now, I was like 30, but I had very little actual experience in healthcare and in tech. And so it was a long shot, but I was just motivated to keep at it. And that's really the message here that I've taken a long time to get to, is that if there's a desire in you to become CIO or CDO or some senior position, keep going for it. Do not let the stats push you down. Don't make excuses about other things that other people make excuses about. Just go for it and really focus and don't lose the dream. And that happens a lot, right? Because you start having kids, life happens, and you sort of like, you sort of give it up, but then you'll regret it later. Unless you make a very cognizant decision, which I respect. Not everyone wants to be CIO or VP or whatever. And they may make a lifestyle decision, say, hey, I used to want that, but now with changes in my life, I'm okay just being a director for the rest of my career. And that's fine. I loved having directors or managers or analysts like that. Not everyone has to or needs to or wants to be in a leadership role. And so you need people of all kinds. So again, full respect. But I'm talking to you who might be that manager, analyst, director, VP that's wanting to get to be CIO or whatever particular position. And I'm just trying to encourage you by telling you some of these stories of where I came from, that you can make it happen, but you have to be resilient and you have to be driven and you have to keep going for it. Of course, it shouldn't even need to be said, but I'm going to say it anyways for any naysayers. Of course, you're doing a great job, high quality deliverables. Your performance is off the chart. It has to be. You've got to be the best at what you're doing. That said, there's 1,000 people like you that are the best at what they're doing. And so, and I knew that, and I would look around the room when I was a director. So now I'm at university hospitals. I'm probably 30 years old. I'm a director. It's a pretty big unit. So there's probably like 25 directors, and there's probably like 6 VPs and then a CIO. So there's a lot of people like me that like want to get to that next level, and they're way more qualified than me in terms of how long they've been there, how long they've been in healthcare, their tech background. They're way more qualified than me. So I'm thinking to myself, how do I become CIO when everyone else wants to become CIO and I don't have the same pedigree? And I'm not the smartest person. They're definitely smarter than me. So how do you do it? And can it be done? Well, obviously it can be done. And how you do it is, yeah, again, not only do you have to perfect your craft, but you have to be that person that volunteers for everything. So when they said, who wants to do United Way? Who wants to develop a curriculum on customer service? I volunteered for everything. I took advantage of every opportunity to volunteer and do stuff, make stuff happen. The other thing I did is I realized, I probably read it, got it from a mentor, that communication was key. And the differentiator between a director and a VP sometimes is communication. So directors, you know, again, being all things being equal, we're okay, average communicators. So I thought, what if I was above average communicator? So I took Dale Carnegie lessons. So I went off and took a week of speaking lessons. I started becoming a student of speakers. I started to studying how to speak and communicate. And every opportunity I had, I would speak and volunteer. And while everyone didn't want to do anything, I did it. And so that raised my visibility in the organization tremendously. And I got better at what I was doing and trying to accomplish. So I kept my eye on that prize. It's like, I know I'm not the best. I know I'm not the best looking. I know I'm not the smartest. I know I don't have the same experience. I know I don't have the right education, but dang it, I can out hustle you. I can be more motivated than you. And I did the same thing parallel in sports or in mountain climbing. But I'll just do I'll do triathlon because that's still my thing today. It's like I beat people who are way better shape than me. I beat them because I out hustle them. And so I had that same mindset developing as I was a young triathlete and in my profession is like, okay, I can't out educate them anymore. They got a better education. I can't out experience them because they've got a 10-year head start. Remember, at least I was this kid and these directors would be like I am today, like in their 50s and stuff. So how do I compete? Well, I'm telling you, the volunteer, go the extra mile, out hustle people. And so, and have a plan, which I've talked about before. So I did all those things. And sure enough, I would get recognized. And so they would say, there was a situation that happened where, well, yeah, first they outsourced. So I'll give you two examples. They outsourced all of IT except for 5 people. And I was ready to go to the outsourcer. I was going to make the best of the situation. But then the CIO said, hey, Ed, I want to keep you and you be, one of our 4 extra people that keep an eye on the outsourcer, in a senior, like a vice president position. So I was like, wow, that is cool that I got selected. And I think because I out hustled, I outworked, I overcame my deficiencies, my weaknesses, where other people were stronger by doing these other things. And as a result, got chosen. All right. So it works. And so even though I was like this young kid, it worked. Then the same thing happened when they created a deputy CIO position. And then ultimately the CIO was let go. And you've heard the story before. So it's just really high level. They were doing these interviews, bringing in people my age now, with all these experience. And so I just went. So here's the other thing. So I already gave you a lot of the steps that you can do to achieve the dreams that are in your heart that maybe other people are keeping you from achieving. So the other thing, I was really informed by this book called Wild at Heart. And I was like, I want that role. I was 33 years old. I want to be CIO. And, I saw the candidates come in because I would help them like prepare like who they're meeting. I was kind of like the coordinator when they were on site for interviews. And I was like, all right, the only thing they have that I don't is 20 years being a CIO already. So I don't have that, can't do that. But I've got everything else. I've got the drive, the motivation, the vision, the passion, the ideas, the energy. I want to do that. And so I went to the CEO with the support of our CFO and knocked on his door and asked him for the job. Told him he could call off the search of the CIO, that I am the CIO. And it worked. And then I worked my ass off again to hold that position. And then when I ultimately left to head to Texas, I got 3 counteroffers to stay, and they were amazing counteroffers. And I just have a philosophy, I've shared it before, that I don't do counteroffers, but I was certainly warmed my heart, and I felt such gratitude to all the leaders there that helped shape who I had become. So I get that all the time. And so even after that, people are always like trying to hold you down, push you down, keep you down. I've dealt with this my entire career, and I could have acquiesced. And that's what most people do, is they acquiesce and they lose sight of their dreams. And so I could keep giving you story after story after story where people try to push me down, try to hold me down. Like, you can't do this. Like, I'll give you one example. This is so real, but I give you dozens. But I give you these examples. One, you believe me, and 2, you can see how I work through them. So this was in the age of, and I have to be careful because, people watch and still get mad and probably try to sue me or something. So I have to be a little bit light on details. But I was at an organization and I realized the power of social media and how the consumers were looking at reviews and people were making comments about the organization, and that there was these new channels for advertising and marketing and things that we could do. So I started a blog. This was many, many years ago. And then I got pushback from certain people in the organization. You can't do a blog. You know, who are you to do a blog? You can't do a blog. And I was like, hey, what are we doing on LinkedIn? Like, our organization has no presence on LinkedIn. What are we doing on Facebook? What are we doing on all these different sites? And so I just created them. I just did them. And then I would get that part of the organization that should be responsible for that more interested. And then we did a handoff. But I got pushed hard against me, like called into the principal's office type things, and a lot of people against me. But I knew it was the right thing for the organization. I just knew that's where we were headed in consumerism, and we needed to get on the ball. And so, had I acquiesced, we would have been behind the curve. Now, ultimately, someone would have picked it up for sure and done something with it. But that, if you're a leader, you got to lead and not acquiesce to the status quo. And that's the differentiator that I'm trying to convey to you, is that out hustling, out doing, thinking ahead, and dealing with the brushback, the pushback. If you're not receiving pushback in your career, you're not doing your job. So let me say that again. If you're not encountering resistance internally, you're not doing your job, because anyone could do that. Anyone could take your job and just make people happy by not doing anything, not trying something new, not being innovative. But that's probably not what you're wired to do. I know I'm not wired that way. And so you got to push, and you'll rub people the wrong way and all that kind of stuff, and have to deal with that. And that's no fun. And I've had my share of that. And sometimes I'm like, wish I would have done things a little bit differently. But overall, I'm glad I stayed true to my call, stayed true to my wiring, because as a result, I've been part of fantastic organizations that have done amazing things with tech and beyond tech to save people's lives. And so I feel like I did the right thing, although sometimes I would have made some different micro decisions along the way, for sure. So I hope that's helpful. So if you're one of those people that are thinking about their career and have this drive to, be at a certain level, go for it. Know your craft. Then you out hustle people. People don't want to give a lot of effort. And so if you're willing to give a lot of effort, become a great communicator is super helpful as well. And then just keep going and realize you're going to get pushback. Maybe you'll get fired, but ultimately you'll be resilient and you'll get past that. And you'll be the CIO, if that's the goal, CDO, or whatever, of the greatest organizations ever, whatever it is that you feel called to. So hope that's helpful. Thanks for watching Lessons from My Mentor.